Welcome, brave souls, to Midnight Whispers. Traverse this realm at your own peril. For within these tales lurk horrors most foul. Tonight's tale may twist the very fabric of your sanity. And a word to the wise, this narrative paints pictures of terror not meant for every eye or ear. Venture ahead if you dare, but remember, you have been warned. The relentless rhythm of the city pulsed outside my window, a constant reminder of the world's ceaseless motion. Inside my apartment, a cramped sanctuary perched on the 12th floor of an aging building. The ambition that once fueled my days had simmered down to the mere flicker of a dream. My living space was an eclectic mix of secondhand furniture and walls, adorned with motivational quotes that had long lost their luster. Each morning, I sat at my worn wooden desk, its surface a mosaic of coffee rings and scribbled notes. The view from the window, a narrow alley framed by the imposing brick walls of neighboring buildings, offered no inspiration. The apartment, with its muted colors and shelves crammed with books, was a testament to my unfulfilled aspirations as a writer. The air was perpetually tinged with the aroma of instant coffee and the faint musk of aging paper. My days were spent ghostwriting autobiographies for people whose lives sparkled with the kind of adventure and success that my own lacked. The click-clack of my laptop's keyboard was the soundtrack to my monotonous routine. I often found myself gazing out the window, the city's cacophony rising up like a wave, and wondered if my stories would ever find a voice of their own. The day the letter arrived, it was wedged between a stack of bills and a glossy magazine. Its envelope was heavy, made of a parchment-like material that felt alien amidst the mundane contents of my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was elegant, a flow of ink and flourish that spoke of a different time. As I ran my fingers over the wax seal, embossed with an intricate H, a sense of intrigue washed over me. Inside my apartment, I broke the seal with reverent slowness. The letter was brief but momentous. Emma Reynolds, as the sole surviving kin of Edith Hawthorne, you are bequeathed Ashwood Manor. The words seemed to dance on the paper, igniting a spark of curiosity. Edith Hawthorne, a name whispered in hushed tones during rare family gatherings, was a figure shrouded in mystery. My family's reluctant mentions of her painted the picture of a reclusive woman, a black sheep who had severed ties under mysterious circumstances. Ashwood Manor was a name I had never heard, a piece of family history that had somehow eluded me. Inheriting it was as unexpected as it was intriguing. The promise of escape from the city, from the endless cycle of ghostwriting, was enticing. Perhaps in the seclusion of this manor, amidst its unknown history and hidden secrets, I could find the inspiration that had long eluded me. In the following days, the letter became my constant companion, its words echoing in my mind. The decision to leave was impulsive, driven by a yearning for change and the allure of mystery. I packed sparingly: clothes, my laptop, a stack of notebooks, and a handful of cherished novels. The thought of Ashwood Manor, a place untouched by the frenetic pace of modern life, filled me with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. As I locked the door to my apartment for the last time, I couldn't help but feel I was closing a chapter of my life. The city, with all its noise and relentless energy, had been my home, my battleground, and my prison. Now was stepping into the unknown, chasing the whispers of a past that was mine, yet unfamiliar. The morning of my departure dawned with a slate gray sky. The city cloaked in a mist that seemed almost symbolic of my journey into the unknown. I boarded the early train with a single suitcase, my heart a tumult of excitement and nerves. The train, an aging but dignified relic, rattled through the countryside. Its rhythmic clatter, a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. As towns and cities gave way to sprawling fields and dense woodlands, I opened my laptop, determined to unravel the mystery of Ashwood Manor and my enigmatic great-aunt Edith. The internet, usually a wellspring of information, offered little. Ashwood Manor was a mere footnote in local history, a once grand estate that had faded into obscurity. Edith Hawthorne was even more elusive, her name appearing only in a few scattered family trees and an old newspaper article that hinted at her reclusive nature. The train journey ended at a small, almost deserted station. From there, I hailed a taxi. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly demeanor, raised his eyebrows when I mentioned Ashwood Manor. "Not many head out that way," he said, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Place has been empty for years. Some say it's haunted." The taxi wound its way through narrow, tree-lined roads, the dense canopy occasionally breaking to reveal glimpses of the gray sky. The further we traveled, the more isolated it felt, the modern world receding until it felt like we were driving into another time. When Ashwood Manor finally came into view, my breath caught in my throat. It was more imposing than I had imagined. A Gothic structure silhouetted against the brooding sky. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and its tall windows peered out like watchful eyes. The taxi slowed to a stop at the end of a long gravel driveway. "Here we are, miss," the driver said, his voice lowering almost instinctively as he gazed at the manor. "Good luck." Stepping out of the taxi, I was enveloped by a silence so profound it was almost a presence in itself. The manor stood before me, its grandeur tainted by years of neglect. It was as if the building itself was waiting, holding its breath for the next chapter in its long history. As the taxi disappeared down the driveway, a sense of isolation settled over me. I was alone, truly alone, in a place that held the secrets of my family's past. The weight of the manor's history pressed upon me as I approached the heavy front door, its wood weathered and worn. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked on its hinges, a sound that echoed through the vast emptiness of Ashwood Manor. The interior was shrouded in shadows, dust motes dancing in the slivers of light that filtered through the curtains. The air was cool and stale, carrying the scent of old wood and a hint of something else, something faintly unsettling. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the grand hallway. The journey had brought me to this moment, to a place out of time, where the whispers of the past were almost audible in the silence. Ashwood Manor was no longer just a name or a story. It was a reality, my reality, and its secrets were mine to uncover. Stepping over the threshold of Ashwood Manor, I was greeted by an atmosphere thick with the passage of time. The grand hallway, with its ornate ceiling and portraits of stern-looking ancestors, seemed to scrutinize my arrival. My sense of isolation was interrupted by a voice, frail yet clear. "You must be Miss Reynolds." turned to see an elderly man emerging from the shadows, his steps slow but steady. He was dressed in attire that seemed from a bygone era, a black suit meticulously kept. His eyes, though aged, held a sharpness to them. I am Samuel the caretaker. Or at least, I was until the manor was left without a hawthorn to tend to. His voice carried a hint of nostalgia, as if each word was steeped in memories of the manor's better days. Samuel explained he had stayed on the grounds, out of loyalty to the Hawthorne lineage, and in hope that the manor would one day awaken from its slumber. His presence, a link to Ashwood's past, seemed both out of place and entirely fitting within the walls of the manor. He handed me a book, its cover worn leather, embossed with the Hawthorne family crest. "This has been passed down through generations," he said. "It contains the history of your family, and more importantly, of Ashwood Manor." Clutching the book, I felt the weight of my heritage in my hands. Samuel excused himself, explaining that his time at the manor had come to an end with my arrival. He wished me well, his farewell a mixture of relief and sorrow. Alone once more, I opened the book in the fading light. The pages were filled with handwritten accounts, letters, and photographs. It was a tapestry of my family's legacy, woven with triumphs and tragedies. Nestled within the pages, I found a sheet of paper, its edges frayed with age. It was titled Rules of Ashwood Manor. The list was written in a hurried scrawl, markedly different from the meticulous handwriting that filled the rest of the book. Never open the windows after sunset. Ignore the cries that echo in the walls. Avoid the locked room on the 3rd floor. Never extinguish the candle in the upstairs hallway. Do not gaze into the mirror in the drawing room for too long. Speak not the name of the First Lord of Ashwood in the dark. Leave an offering at the garden statue during a full moon. As I read, a chill ran down my spine. These rules, cryptic and ominous, suggested a reality to the manor far beyond the ordinary. They hinted at secrets and mysteries that lurked within the walls of Ashwood, secrets that were now mine to explore. Samuel's departure left me truly alone, the silence of the manor more profound in his absence. The weight of responsibility and curiosity rested heavily on my shoulders as I stood in the dimming light. The family book in my hands, a gateway to understanding the enigma of Ashwood Manor. With the family book clutched in my hands, I ventured deeper into Ashwood Manor. Each room I entered was like stepping into a different era. The air heavy with the scent of old wood and a faint, unplaceable musk. The portraits on the walls, ancestors unknown to me, seemed to watch with an intensity that belied their stillness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows, I remembered the first rule. Never open the windows after sunset. The peculiarity of the instruction nagged at me, but the unease in my gut urged compliance. I drew the heavy curtains closed, the room now illuminated only by the soft glow of the candles I had lit. The cries mentioned were not long in coming. As night enveloped the manor, a faint weeping echoed through the halls, its source indiscernible. The sound was mournful and chillingly human. Remembering the rule, I fought the instinct to seek out its origin, and instead pressed on. My exploration led me to a grand staircase spiraling upwards. The 3rd rule flashed in my mind. Avoid the locked room on the 3rd floor. My curiosity piqued. I ascended the stairs, each step creaking underfoot. The hallway on the 3rd floor was lined with doors, all ajar, save for one. A cold draft emanated from the locked door, and I could hear a faint, rhythmic tapping from within. With a shiver, I moved away, respecting the unseen boundary set by my ancestors. In the upstairs hallway, a lone candle flickered in its holder, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Remembering the 4th rule, I carefully avoided touching it. Its flame seemed to possess a life of its own, swaying gently, as though in rhythm with some unseen melody. The drawing room was a time capsule of elegance, with furniture draped in dust covers and a grand piano sitting silently in the corner. The mirror mentioned in the 5th rule stood against one wall, its surface speckled with age. I caught my reflection in it, a look of apprehension in my eyes. Heeding the warning, I tore my gaze away. The 6th rule, warning against speaking the name of the First Lord of Ashwood in the dark, played in my mind as I wandered the dimly lit corridors. The air seemed to thicken with each step, as if the manor itself was holding its breath. As the night deepened, I found myself drawn to the garden, bathed in moonlight. The statues there cast long, ominous shadows. The 7th rule came to mind, and on a whim, I left an apple at the base of the largest statue, a marble figure of a woman draped in flowing robes. Returning inside, the manor felt different, as though my adherence to the rules had been acknowledged by the house itself. Ashwood Manor was more than a building. It was a living piece of history, with its own set of laws and secrets. In my temporary bedroom, a modest chamber that had once been a guest room, I lay awake, the family book open beside me. The rules of Ashwood Manor, cryptic as they were, had set the stage for my stay. The manor was a puzzle, and I was determined to uncover its mysteries, to understand the legacy that had been passed down to me. But as sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ashwood Manor was not just a place to be explored, but a force to be reckoned with. As the days blended into nights at Ashwood Manor, the line between reality and the surreal began to blur. The whispers in the walls, the shifting shadows, and the inexplicable occurrences provided a fertile ground for my imagination. It was in this haunting solitude that I began to pen a horror story, one born from the very heart of Ashwood. Each morning, I would set up my writing space in the library, the morning light filtering through the stained glass, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the ancient tomes that surrounded me. The library became my sanctuary, a place where the whispers of the past met the click of my keyboard. My story centered around a protagonist, a young woman much like myself, who inherited an ancient manor. As she navigated its corridors and uncovered its secrets, she found herself entangled in a web of supernatural events that mirrored the peculiarities I was experiencing. The cries in the walls transformed into ethereal voices, guiding my protagonist through hidden passageways. The locked room on the 3rd floor became a portal to the manor's tragic past in my narrative. The mirror in the drawing room revealed unspeakable horrors from other dimensions. Each rule from the list I had found became a chapter in my story, a thread in the tapestry of mystery and terror I was weaving. Writing in Ashwood Manor had an uncanny effect. It was as if the manor itself was dictating the story through me. Sometimes I would read back what I had written and find passages that I barely remembered crafting. Their words eerily resonant with the manor's atmosphere. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the manor was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I wrote a scene where my protagonist discovered a hidden room. It was a room that existed outside of time, holding the essence of the manor's sorrow and joy. That very night, as I wandered the corridors, I stumbled upon a door that I had not noticed before. Hesitantly, I reached for the knob, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. The door creaked open to reveal a small chamber, untouched by time. Dust motes danced in the beam of light that filtered through a crack in the ceiling. The room was a time capsule, filled with trinkets and portraits from a bygone era. It was as if I had stepped into the scene I had just written, the line between my story and reality becoming ever more indistinct. Each day at Ashwood Manor fed my story, the manor itself becoming a character as alive and complex as any human in my tale. But as the narrative progressed, an unsettling thought took root in my mind. Was I shaping the story? Or was Ashwood Manor using me to tell its own? As I delved deeper into both my story and the exploration of Ashwood Manor, the line between fiction and reality began to blur dangerously. The manor, with its creaking floors and whispering walls, seemed to respond to the narrative I was weaving, as if it were awakening from a long slumber. One stormy night, as I typed in the dim light of the library, the power suddenly flickered and went out, plunging the manor into darkness. The only light was the sporadic flash of lightning, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. I remembered the rule: never enter the cellar during a thunderstorm. Yet, a part of me, fueled by a writer's curiosity and an escalating sense of dread, felt compelled to do just that. With a flashlight in hand, I descended the creaking steps to the cellar. The air grew colder with each step, and the feeling of being watched intensified. The cellar was a labyrinth of shadows, with rows of vintage wine bottles and forgotten relics covered in dust. As I ventured deeper, the beam of my flashlight fell upon a figure. My heart skipped a beat, but it was just a mannequin, dressed in an antiquated gown, its face featureless and blank. But as I turned away, I heard a sound that chilled my blood. A soft whisper echoing in the darkness, calling my name. I rushed back to the safety of the upper floors, the echoes of my footsteps loud in the silent manor. That night, I barely slept, the boundaries of my story becoming entangled with the eerie reality of Ashwood. The next few days were a whirlwind of strange occurrences. The mirror in the drawing room showed fleeting glimpses of figures standing behind me, disappearing when I turned to look. The cries in the walls grew more desperate, as if imploring me to acknowledge them, and the locked room on the third floor. The door now seemed to throb and pulsate, as if something on the other side was trying to break free. In my writing, the protagonist started to experience events before they unfolded in the manor. It was as if the story was predicting the horrors to come. I wrote about a hidden garden where the statues came to life under the moonlight, their stone faces twisted in anguish. That very night, as I walked through the moonlit garden, the statues appeared to be in different positions than I remembered, their expressions more pained and lifelike. One evening, while writing in the library, I heard a loud crash from upstairs. Investigating, I found a picture frame that had fallen off the wall. As I picked it up, I realized it was a portrait of Edith Hawthorne, her eyes staring back at me with an intensity that seemed almost accusatory. It felt like a warning, a sign that I was delving into things best left undisturbed. Each day, the manor revealed more of its dark heart, and my story became a reflection of its soul. The horrors I wrote about were no longer confined to the pages of my manuscript. They were becoming a terrifying reality in Ashwood Manor. I couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was not just a setting for my story, but an entity with its own terrifying narrative, one that I was helplessly entangled in. As the days passed, Ashwood Manor seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its corridors and rooms steeped in a sense of watchful expectancy. The more I uncovered in my writing, the more the manor seemed to reveal of its hidden, sinister layers. One afternoon, while exploring a long-forgotten wing of the manor, I stumbled upon a room filled with old dolls. Their glass eyes seemed to follow me, and their porcelain faces were etched with expressions that oscillated between innocence and malice. This eerie discovery soon wove its way into my story, where the protagonist found herself trapped in a room with dolls that whispered secrets of the manor's past. That night, the whispers in the walls grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be guiding me, leading me down a narrow, twisting corridor that I didn't remember seeing before. Following these ethereal murmurs, I found myself in front of a dusty mirror. The glass was cloudy, but as I peered into it, the reflection twisted, showing me a version of the manor that was decayed and desolate. In this twisted reflection, shadowy figures lurked, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I retreated from the mirror, my heart pounding, only to find that the corridor behind me had changed. The walls were now lined with old, tattered paintings, their subjects' eyes seeming to bore into my soul. Panic set in as I realized the manor was changing around me, its layout an ever-shifting maze. In my panicked state, I stumbled upon a hidden staircase spiraling downwards. Against my better J. In my panicked state, I stumbled upon a hidden staircase spiraling downwards. Against my better judgment, compelled by an inexplicable force, I descended. The staircase led to a cavernous underground chamber, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, its surface stained with age and darker, unidentifiable marks. As I approached the altar, a sense of overwhelming dread washed over me. The chamber felt like a place forgotten by time, a sanctuary for something ancient and unspeakable. On the altar lay a book, its cover adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe under my gaze. I reached out to touch the book, but a sudden gust of wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into darkness. In that suffocating blackness, I heard a voice, deep and resonant, speaking a language I couldn't understand. The words twisted around me, echoing off the chamber walls, filling me with a terror beyond comprehension. I fled the chamber, the voice still ringing in my ears, and somehow found my way back to the familiar parts of the manor. The experience left me shaken, blurring the lines between my story and the nightmarish reality of Ashwood Manor. The following days were a blur of haunting experiences. The locked room on the 3rd floor began to emit a low, mournful moan, and the garden statues appeared to weep tears of blood under the light of the full moon. The manor was no longer just a setting for my horror story. It had become a living, breathing entity, its malevolent presence seeping into every page I wrote. As I continued to document my protagonist's descent into the dark heart of her ancestral home, I couldn't escape the feeling that Ashwood Manor was writing its own story through me. A story that was far from over, and one that I was inextricably a part of. In the weeks that followed, Ashwood Manor's sinister grip tightened. The line between my written fiction and the manor's haunting reality became indistinguishable. It was as if by breaking the rules in my story, I had unwittingly invited the manor to unleash its true horror upon me. One fateful night, driven by a reckless urge to challenge the manor's power, I broke the most cardinal rule. I spoke aloud the name of the first Lord of Ashwood in the dark. The air immediately grew colder, and a thunderous silence filled the manor. A sense of impending doom enveloped me, and the walls themselves seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy. The manor erupted into chaos. The cries in the walls turned into tormented screams. The locked room's door burst open, revealing a vortex of swirling shadows, and the figures in the mirrors stepped out into the room, their forms twisted and grotesque. In a panic, I ran through the shifting corridors of the manor, the portraits on the walls now alive, their eyes filled with rage. The dolls from the hidden room pursued me, their porcelain faces cracked and their tiny hands reaching out. The statues in the garden animated, blocking my path, their stone faces contorted in anger. I realized then that Ashwood Manor was not just a house. It was a living entity, a guardian of dark secrets and ancient curses. By breaking the rules, I had unleashed its wrath. In a desperate bid for escape, I found myself at the front door. With the last ounce of my strength, I pushed it open and stumbled out into the night. The manor loomed behind me, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light, as if it were alive with the spirits of the past. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road, where a passing motorist saw me and, taking pity on my distraught state, drove me to the nearest town. Back in my city apartment, the nightmare of Ashwood Manor seemed like a distant, if not haunting, memory. The manuscript I had written there, however, was real and vivid, a chilling account of my experiences in the manor. I submitted it to a publisher, not expecting much, but to my surprise, it was met with enthusiasm. The book, titled Echoes of Ashwood, became a bestseller. Its blend of horror and reality captivated readers worldwide. People were fascinated by the story of the haunted manor and the writer who had dared to challenge its rules. As for me, I found a certain peace in my return to normalcy, but the shadows of Ashwood Manor never fully left me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would wake up to a faint whisper or see a fleeting shadow in the corner of my eye, a reminder that some parts of the manor had followed me back. Echoes of Ashwood was my breakthrough as a writer, but it came at a price. Ashwood Manor had given me a story, but in return, it had taken a piece of me, a piece that I would never get back. The manor remained a part of me, its echoes a constant, eerie reminder of the thin line between reality and the horrors that lie beyond. And so, another tale from the depths of night concludes. But remember, dear listeners, in the realm of midnight whispers, the echoes of our stories never truly fade. If tonight's tale left you hungering for more, explore our anthology of horrors. For those brave enough, delve into our previous stories and discover what lurks in the shadows. Before you venture back into the safety of daylight, remember to like this video if it sent shivers down your spine. Subscribe and ring the bell so the whispers of the midnight hour always find their way to you. And should you dare, leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We revel in knowing which parts of our tales resonate with your darkest curiosities. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers, for they have many